Fellow Toastmasters, and welcome to Toolbox Tuesday. Our goal today is to put some tools in your toolbox to help you pound out problems and sharpen your saw. I'm excited about today's webinar. We've got an exciting topic. Our topic today is how to run a club officer meeting. And our presenter is District 106 Training Director, Joanna Carley. She's a distinguished Toastmaster. Joanna joined Toastmasters in 2006 in order to become a more confident speaker, and it helped immensely. She continues to be part of Toastmasters because she sees how it improves communication and leadership skills for herself and also for others. She's currently serving as the Training Director for District 106, and in her free time, leads a team at Target Corporation's supply chain and runs her own leadership coaching company. Please welcome distinguished Toastmaster, Joanna Carley.
Hey guys. It is a little bit weird to not have the applause. I can totally understand why Brian had a hard time with that last week. So tonight we are talking about how to run the club officer meetings. I'm going to share a couple of different pieces for you, and then we will, as Dave said, have time for questions. So please feel free to raise your hand or put your questions into the chat, and we will move forward from there and try to get through as many questions as we can. We have up to 45 minutes for this, so we have plenty of time to cover questions. So the first thing that we think is really important is, why do we even meet? Why do we even have club officer meetings? Well, there are a couple of really key reasons why club officer meetings are important. Obviously, they're a place for us to surface and solve for club concerns. This can be something that the executive committee has recognized as an opportunity. It could be something that someone else in the club has surfaced as an opportunity, or it could just be new business that we need to address as a club. Part of the officer role is that you are accountable and responsible for helping the club become stronger. And so those club officer meetings can be a great way to cover that information and work together on solving those problems. There's also a benefit sometimes in having a club officer discussion before bringing those ideas out to the rest of the club. And so part of the club officer meeting can be a really effective way for you to discuss the challenges and kind of get ahead of all of the ideas and questions that the group may come up with. Officer accountability is a really important piece of the executive meeting because all of us as officers are signing ourselves up to help our club. As a VP of membership, my accountability is to be able to help drive membership programs for my club. In another club, I am a VP of PR, and so I am accountable to helping us drive more public relations initiatives for the club as well. And the executive club meeting, or the club officer meeting, is a great way for all of us to work together to help hold each other accountable. While it is the president's role to make sure that everyone is accountable for their tasks, we can help support our president in making sure that we're asking other club officers, what do you need to help you be successful? One of the most important topics to cover in any club officer meeting is the plan for distinguished club success. Now, every time you have a meeting, and you can have them every single month, you can have them every other month, I would recommend not having them less than quarterly, which means that you would have 4 of them within your Toastmasters year. In every one of those meetings, you should be talking about the Distinguished Club program. And the reason that we want you to do that is not essentially just to talk about it, but to make sure that your club is performing the Toastmasters responsibilities in a way that serves the members of that club. At the beginning of the year, this can include talking about what members are trying to achieve for the year. What goals are they trying to achieve? How can we help them achieve those goals? And insert that into your club success plan. So at the beginning of the year, you'll be using it to develop your club success plan. And then throughout the rest of the year, those executive meetings are also a way to follow up on the plans for distinguished club success. We all know that plans change. People come into the club, people leave the club. Maybe somebody had set out a goal to say they wanted to achieve a specific leadership award or communication award by the end of the year, and that changes over the time frame of the 12 months of your role. So as an officer, you can then bring those ideas back to the officer meeting and be able to help everybody understand what can we do differently to ensure that our club still achieves distinguished this year. And then lastly, as you get to the end of the year that you are an officer, you can start planning for next year's success. This can be starting to plan for who might be strong officers for the following year. It might be starting to plan speechcraft or membership drives over the summer months. And it might just be setting up the next year to also be successful with the Distinguished Club Success Plan. But whatever it is, you can start planning for that even before next year's officers take part. Before we go into who attends the meeting, I want to share with you how you can record what's happening at the Toastmasters meeting. So if you, I'm gonna move this little guy out. If you go to toastmasters.org, even if you're not logged in, you should be able to just search for Club Officer Minutes. And you should be able to find a template that will, if my internet picks up, you should be able to find a template of the meeting minutes. As you can guess, the secretary is typically responsible for taking the minutes of the officer meeting. And then those can be shared out either to all of the club officers, or what I would recommend is sharing them out to the entire club. Transparency helps us build trust among our group. And so this is a great way to show your club what your officers are doing in those meetings. So you can see if you search for it, it comes up as the first item. It will come up as there's a template here. You can download it. And it's a really quick and easy way to be able to record what happens. So you can fill in all of the pieces in red with your information, and then it will help you record what was happening. So going back to who attends a club officer meeting, the answer should be your club executive board, right? All 7 officers are invited and encouraged to participate. In fact, if any of your officers are not able to attend, they should be sending their information as an update if for some reason they have a conflict, so that they're still participating and still accountable for their roles within the club. And then the immediate past president is also part of this executive board. Now, in some cases, right, your immediate past president maybe has moved to a different club or isn't available. Obviously, there are going to be some exceptions, but if possible, have your immediate past president attend those executive committee meetings. It's very helpful because they can provide insight, they can talk about what had happened in the past, and quite frankly, they can be a fantastic mentor to the president or any of the other officers, as they've already experienced a lot of the same situations. The last piece about who attends is any Toastmasters member who is a member of your club should be allowed to attend your officer meetings. Now, that may mean that they are allowed to come in and observe, depending on how your club functions, or that they are allowed to participate with all of the same conversations as all of the officers. That would depend on how your club's executive board operates. But again, in the sense of transparency, it's very helpful to have our members join in to officer meetings. This is also a really great way near the end of your Toastmasters officer year to help new people understand, what does an officer do? What are the roles? What are the responsibilities? Some of the meeting must-haves. So if you are looking at these and you're thinking, gosh, this seems extremely familiar, it's because you may have already seen it in your club officer handbook. If you have your club officer handbook and you open it to page 11, you'll find instructions on all of these meetings must-haves. You should have an agenda. You should have topics on the agenda and times, including an end time. One of the questions that we get frequently is, how long does our club officer meeting need to be? And the answer is how long it needs to be for you to complete your agenda items in a reasonable amount of time. That also means that you'll need to follow procedures, including Robert's Rules of Order, to keep the conversation on track. And that there may be times where you'll need to work with your officers to move forward with a decision or move forward with a conversation through Robert's Rules of Order, so that you don't end up with 30 minutes of discussion and still don't have any further progress on the solution. I would imagine we'll probably have some questions on that at the end, so we can certainly talk through that. But I would recommend that the president starts with the agenda, but all of the club officers have agenda items, including a report from each officer. VP of Education, what do you have to report? Here's where we are at the club success plan. VP of Membership, what do you have to report? Here are some recent initiatives that I've been thinking about or have completed, and so on and so on and so on. Some of the other meeting must-haves are participation and progress. So participation is essential to the success of your executive board. If your officers aren't all able to participate in person, consider using something like these Zoom meetings. District 106 actually has a professional Zoom account, but you can actually use Zoom as a free user, and it allows people to connect either through video or through phone or just one or the other, so that they can actually meet without having to all be in the same physical location. It's very important that all of your officers participate in one way or another so that they're part of your true executive board. Progress. It's really important that all officers are able to report on what they've accomplished so far. And then you can move to new business items. Forward thinking. So what key points, what key milestones are going to happen between now and our next meeting? If you're having meetings every 3 months, you may need to review in the Club Officer Handbook those extra timeline points. I believe they're on pages 18 through 22 that will tell you these are the things that will happen in the next 3 months. It might be that dues will be due. How do we want to approach that? It might be officer training is coming soon. How will we approach that and who's able to go to training? Here's when our speech contest should be planned. So being able to think about all those things in advance and including those on your agenda will make your job so much easier as a club officer. You'll be able to anticipate what's coming up next. And so when your members or your area director has a question about where you're at in that process, you'll already have thought about the plan for it. The last meeting must-have that is listed in the club handbook is creativity. Because we always have done it that way isn't a good reason. It might be true, but are we doing things because we think we should, because it says so in the club handbook, or, well, that's just always how we've done it? Be creative about the ideas that you bring to your club officer meetings. Encourage that creativity in others. We love to hear ideas from how other clubs accomplish new membership goals or how they've come up with new ways to implement speechcraft within their clubs. Encourage that, especially in your new officers, in bringing their ideas to the table. At this point, I am opening it up to questions. Please use either the chat function or raise your hand, and we can, Dave will unmute you and we can start answering questions.
Joanna, we have a question here. The question is, I missed the template. I missed where the template is found.
Oh,
which website?
Sure. So go to Toastmasters International. So it's www.toastmasters.org. And you go to Officer Minutes or Club Officer Minutes and search. You don't even have to log in for this point, and it should be able to find it. And then it comes up with there's two different versions. There's the club meeting minutes, and then there's just the meeting minutes. Oh, sorry, it's the club executive meeting minutes. And once you hit download, it will pull up in the bottom of your screen. And then it will show each of the officers, their report from their committees, and any motions that were brought up. Other questions?
Yes, my question is, typically what is part of the reports given by the, for instance, the Vice President of Education and at an officer's executive meeting?
Sure. One of the ways that that you can use to help with this is the Club Officer Handbook, because in there it'll say these are the things that each role is responsible for. So I kind of think of it in that framework, right? Typically well, I guess it depends. In some of my clubs, the president goes first, and in some of them, they go last. The president may talk about, here are some overall things I've noticed about the club, or here are some overall initiatives that I want to drive. Here's the vision at the beginning of the year. They'll typically say, this is the vision for the club and what I want this year to look like, or things that I could use help from the other officers. Vice President of Education, because they are responsible for the educational programs, will typically give a report on the DCP, so where people are at in terms of achieving those educational goals, as well as anything else that they come up with in terms of specific club members maybe that need help or encouragement with their educational goals. VP membership will typically talk about membership drives or other membership initiatives, as well as the report on the number of current members that there are. VP of PR will talk about an EPR initiative. So frequently you'll hear the membership and PR vice presidents work together on initiatives, and they may just each share their own perspective on that. The secretary frequently will share the meeting minutes from the last meeting to kind of refresh the group on where things are at, and they will also be responsible for taking the minutes. In addition, there are a few other tasks that the secretaries do throughout the year, including updating the officer roster either once or twice a year. So those would be updates that they would provide. The Sergeant at Arms would provide any, depending on your club and what your Sergeant at Arms responsibilities do, they may provide different types of updates. So if a club has a lot of supplies, the Sergeant at Arms may be reporting in on that. For other clubs, there may not be a lot that the Sergeant at Arms reports on, unless there's something about the room setup kind of concept that needs to be talked about. Who am I missing? Treasurer. Oh, well, they'll give a treasurer's report. They'll report back on where the club's funds are, what has been spent, and any pending funding that needs to be discussed as well. Did that answer what you're looking for?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
So what is the benefit of having a well-organized or an effective club officer meeting?
Yeah, for somebody like me who prefers her meetings to be very efficient, I have sat through some officer meetings that are not efficient because we didn't have an agenda. And my last officer meeting maybe 2 months ago was amazing. Our president reached out to us in advance and said, hey, these are the couple of topics that I'd like to have on the agenda. He checked to make sure that there was a time that could accommodate for all of us. And then we went, he kind of had a sketched out amount of time that we would need. He asked us if we would want to add any items to the agenda. We added a few things, and we started and ended the meeting for the most part on time. And we actually accomplished a lot during that time. Having a well-organized meeting where it's very clear who's running the meeting, typically that would be the president, and where it's very clear that people can bring up topics, but also that there's a point at which we say, we're also going to move on to the next topic, is really, really important. The other thing I think that was really helpful for us was making sure that it was connected and available for everyone who could attend. If you are only able to have 1 or 2 people attend in person, it might be worth getting a phone call together to at least have the conversation. And having it that early in the season I think what would have been August when we had our officer meeting, has made us a much more unified officer group, and we are all on the same page about what's important to our members and what's important for us as officers this year.
Okay. So if you have, you had mentioned earlier that it's beneficial for all of the club officers to attend the meetings. Do you think that if you make that, or if you establish that as a norm, does that increase ownership in your club officers' roles? Do they feel more of a sense of ownership that, this is my role and I can run with this? Or
for sure, I think there's a couple pieces there. So yes, it might give them more ownership, but also more autonomy, because that assumes that the president is giving them a conversation at the beginning of the year, or that they're going to officer training and they have a clear understanding of what their role is. And so whether it's ownership or autonomy, it enables them to then move forward with those different projects. The other side of that is, if you have all of your officers in that meeting, they're more likely to work together on solutions as well, or be able to bring up other people in the club who might be interested in helping out with something. I can't put a speechcraft project on by myself, but I feel very comfortable that if I bring it to my executive committee, that one or two of them will say, hey, I have this idea about how you could make it even better. And one other one might say, who would be really interested in this? It'll be somebody else in our group. So I don't have to do all the work, but I still have more autonomy and ownership of the actual work, because I don't feel like I'm in it on my own.
okay, so it helps you be more of a leader, and as opposed to having to be the doer and carry all the burden.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah,
it's a better way for us to match up our skill sets, right, with the people who are passionate and the people who are skilled in something, matching those up with the tasks that we want to get done.
Okay. If there's someone out there, and I'm sure none of the people who are dialed in today, have this, but if there's someone out there who says, I just don't know what my role is supposed to be as a club officer, where should they go to look?
I thought I'd have my club officer handbook right next to me, but I don't have it right there. But the club officer handbook you should have received one in person from your club president, but if you didn't, don't worry, because you can also go to Toastmasters.org. So I'm going to quickly go back to sharing. And if you are back in Toastmasters.org, you can just search Club Officer Handbook, and it will immediately give you an option to download. So this is what it would look like if you got it in paper version. But if you didn't, you can always download it here and print it off if you'd like. And in there, for each of the officer roles, it gives you like 2 to 4 pages of exactly what you need to know as you were an officer. And if that isn't enough, you can certainly reach out to your president or one of your other officers. And if that isn't enough, you can also go to your area directors, who should be able to help you through what club officers do and what each of the roles entails. There are a ton of resources out here. There are a ton of people who have been through these roles who are willing to help if they know that you need the help to do so.
Right. And is there any event where we can get specific training on how to be a better and more effective officer?
You mean like club officer training, Dave?
Yeah, like that. How do we find out about that?
Club officer training will start again in December for the second round. So the first round of club officer training was much more focused on the basics of what do you need to do, what do you need to know to do your role well, and how do we focus a little bit on membership building. The second round will get into some other topics that are really important for officers, but they weren't necessarily the first things that you need to know. So those club officer trainings will come out starting in December through the end of February. The division directors are in the process of setting up locations for those right now. So you'll hear about them from your division and area directors, or you can always go on to www.D106TM, www.D106 D106TM.org. And on the events calendar, we'll have all of the officer trainings. Once they get set up, they will get on the calendar. And we encourage you to attend, both because they're a great source of information, and you'll get to see Dave and myself, of course. And also, it's a great way for officers to meet people in other clubs and learn more about what works for them. And that has probably been one of the easiest, most helpful ways that I have learned how to be a better officer, is learning what other officers are doing.
All right. Well, I don't want to hog all of the questions. So we've got a number of people on the call. I promise I won't turn your video on if you ask a question. But if you've got another question, you can raise your hand, or you can type it into the Q&A box as well.
Secretary typically taking minutes on weekly meetings? I know officers, but I'm wondering if we are also supposed to be taking minutes or doing some sort of recording. It looks like that in the officer handbook that we are to be doing something weekly. Is that typical or unusual for the secretary?
I would say it varies. If the secretary isn't already doing it, it is helpful to have the secretary record the basics of the meeting, meaning have a record of who attended and who performed what role. It doesn't need to be pages and pages of detail. Some clubs do it, a lot of clubs don't. It can be really helpful to be able to go back in case anyone ever needs anything. For example, in one of my clubs, somebody had their car broken into and their Toastmasters bag was one of the things they stole. And so she was able to recreate the speeches that she had completed because they had minutes of all of the previous meetings. So she didn't have to restart all of her manuals in that sense. That's a pretty small likelihood that that's what will happen, but there is that possibility. The other thing that's nice about it, I'm in a club that just celebrated its 40th anniversary, and it's been fantastic to have years and years worth of those minutes so that we can go back and look at what people were doing and see how it's changed over time. For sure, at a minimum, officer meetings, I would say you definitely want to, and at a minimum, anything that your club votes on in any kind of business meeting. In some clubs, that's only held at the officer meeting, but in some clubs, that is part of the regular business meeting within any normal meeting, and in that case, you for sure want to document all of those. Dave, I don't know if you'd add anything else there.
Oh, you have a beast in your house. No, I think you covered it quite well.
Thank you.
See, everybody loves the cat.
Yes.
Yes, my question is there a recommended Robert's Rules of Order that a simple one that can be used for our meeting? I noticed that the meetings that I've attended in the past have not really used Robert's Rules. It just sort of kind of did it off the cuff. Is there something? Is there something on the Toastmasters website that can better?
Dave has a recommendation for the best book, I think.
Parliamentary rules, yes.
Yeah, there is, I'll tell you what, Bob, I don't have it with me right now, but there is a shorter version of Robert's Rules of Order. You can get it off of Amazon. And what I will do for anyone who registered or who attended the webinar, I will send out a link to that book. And as far as a quick reference, I'll take a quick look and see if there's a pocket version of it, and I will send out information on that. I don't have it right in front of me, but I'll make sure it gets into your hands.
All right, thank you.
You bet.
There was a comment that it'd be awesome if there were just a condensed one-page outline of Robert's Rules. I guess, Dave, if you've come across anything, that would be great. I'm not aware of anything that is that condensed, though.
Yeah, I'll take a look.
A little more complicated than that.
Mm-hmm.
It's at least 2 pages.
I don't see any more hands. I I'm going to assume that that is the end of our questions.
Okay.
So Joanna, I want to thank you for leading this talk. This is an important subject, and I'm hoping that everyone got a lot out of it. Next week, we've got another Toolbox Tuesday, and I'll tell you what, can you tell us what it's about?
Yes, I can. I had to think for a second which one it was. You'll have me as your gracious host again for Vice President of PR. In the next few weeks, probably over the next 8 or 9 weeks, will be most of those Toolbox Tuesdays will be covering a specific officer role position. So next week, we're going to start with VP of PR. And then as we go through October, November, and probably a little bit of December to finish up all of them, each week we will cover a different officer role. Some of those will be interspersed with a couple other topics. So always check the www.d106.tm.org website, because that will have the most up-to-date schedule for Toolbox Tuesdays. And next week will be VP of PR. So if you are interested in being a VP of PR, or if you are one or you have one in your club, which, spoiler alert, you do, please encourage those people to attend, and we'll do something similar. We'll run through some of the core functions. We'll share ideas and talk about any questions that those VP PRs have next week at 7 p.m.
Well, everyone, I want to thank you all for coming out. Thank you, Joanna, and thank you for being part of this webinar series. This has been Toolbox Tuesday. We'll see you next week.